In a world obsessed with bigger, brighter, and more extravagant holiday displays, would you believe that a single candle transformed an entire community? The power of simplicity might just surprise you.
That's fascinating. I recently came across this remarkable story about a family whose modest tradition had exactly that kind of impact. What struck me most was how their circumstances shaped their approach.
Well, tell me more about this family. In our age of elaborate light shows and synchronized music displays, what made their simple gesture so powerful?
So here's what makes it unique. Despite having very little materially, this family maintained an unwavering tradition of placing just one candle in their window every Christmas Eve, specifically to welcome the Christ child.
You know what's really interesting about that? The contrast between their material poverty and their spiritual wealth. I mean, they could have felt pressure to do more, to compete with neighbors' displays, but they stayed true to this one meaningful gesture.
That's exactly what makes it so powerful. And what happened next in the community was truly remarkable. People started noticing this lone candle, and it sparked something unexpected.
Hmm, let me guess. Other families began putting up candles too? Though I imagine there's more to the story than just copycats.
Well, you're right, but it went so much deeper. The candle became this powerful symbol of hope and welcome. Soon, people weren't just adding candles, they were fundamentally changing how they connected with each other.
That's fascinating. How did this transformation actually play out in the community? Were there specific examples of how people's behaviors changed?
Oh, the changes were remarkable. Neighbours who had never spoken began checking in on each other. They organised meal trains for families in crisis, created informal support networks, and really looked out for those who might be struggling during the holidays.
You know what strikes me about this? The family never sought recognition or tried to take credit for starting this movement. They just maintained their simple tradition year after year.
That's such an important point. Their consistency and humility were key to the whole thing. They lit that candle at sunset every Christmas Eve using just a simple white candle, nothing fancy or expensive.
And speaking of consistency, I'm particularly interested in how this tradition evolved over time. Did it continue through multiple generations?
Well, what's beautiful is that the children grew up with this tradition and carried it into their own homes, spreading this practice of welcome and community care to new neighborhoods.
That makes me think about how we often overcomplicate things when trying to make a difference. Sometimes the simplest gesture, maintained faithfully over time, can create the most profound impact.
Hmm. And you know what's particularly striking? The way this spiritual renewal led to such practical changes in how people cared for each other.
Could you share some specific examples of how this played out? I'm curious about the real world impact on individuals in the community.
So there was this elderly woman who had lived alone for years. Suddenly she found herself surrounded by caring neighbours during the holidays. And another family facing financial hardship received anonymous support from people they'd never even met.
That's incredible. How did they manage to keep these support networks organic without turning them into formal programs or organizations?
Well, that's another fascinating aspect. They intentionally kept things informal. The spontaneous neighbour to neighbour nature of it all preserved the genuine connection that made it so meaningful.
You know, this whole story challenges our assumptions about what it takes to create meaningful change. We often think we need elaborate plans or significant resources, but sometimes the smallest light can illuminate the biggest possibilities.
That's exactly it. And perhaps that's the real miracle here. Not just the transformation of a community, but the reminder that each of us has the power to be that light for others, in whatever small way we can.
Looking toward the future, what do you think this story teaches us about creating lasting change in our own communities?
Well, I think it shows us that authentic, meaningful change often starts with these small, consistent acts of faith and welcome, and that sometimes the simplest traditions can carry the most profound impact.